It was about 600 years before the life of Jesus when the armies of Babylon came to Jerusalem and destroyed it. After 2.5 years of fighting, you can imagine that city was devastated. And the temple, the holy place of God, even it was reduced to rubble and ash. Now, the practice of the Babylonians was to utterly remove the entire power structure of the people that they had conquered. And they did that by forcing any of the surviving leaders, political and religious, as well as their entire extended families, to uproot their lives and move hundreds of miles away from where they had been to where they could have no influence on life in that place anymore. And this is what happened to Jesus' ancestors. Their prized city of Jerusalem was destroyed, and many people were forced to live in exile for 70 years in the city of Babylon. Jeremiah was a prophet of God throughout all of this, and after the exiled people had been through it, Jeremiah delivered to them the words of God. And I'm not sure how welcome these words might have been, because the people he was speaking to and writing to, they had lost everything. But still, in these words we find a profound understanding of how connected we are to the community that is around us. And the prophet Jeremiah, "Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon, build houses and live in them. Plant gardens and eat what they produce. Take wives and have sons and daughters. Take wives for your sons and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters. Multiply there and do not decrease. But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf. For in its welfare you will find your welfare." For in its welfare you will find your welfare. Maybe the human temptation, the human tendency, is to believe, to act, to live out of this other sense, that we should seek our own well-being, to take care of ourselves and our own, and then just let others do the same. And if that is how the exiles of Jerusalem, living in captivity among the people who had conquered them, if that is how they imagined their own survival, I can't say that I blame them. The words of God to them, spoken by the prophet Jeremiah, they call them instead to broaden their perspective to the survival and well-being of the very people they rightly despised and feared. God said, build houses among these people. Plant gardens and eat the local foods. Let your families prosper among your new neighbors and seek the welfare of the city of your exile. Pray for the people there. In the welfare of Babylon, you will find your own welfare. In September, we have been thinking about stewardship here at First Christian, and to do this, we have taken a step back to look at how we are responsible as stewards for the lives of children around us. We can see the results of our stewardship by looking at children and young people. They are the evidence of what we are providing in ministry. And all of this comes from a place of gratitude for us, because we know that ours is a God whose love endures forever and whose faithfulness extends to all generations. And so, like God, we consider how what we do now impacts those who are coming after us, which begins, of course, with the very children who are in our midst. We have spent some time already being thankful for how this is happening among our diverse forms of families in our own church ministries. And today we want to kind of lift our gaze up, away from ourselves and to the community that we call home. In seeking the welfare of Jeffersonville, people here are really participating in this faithfulness to all generations. Now, it would be impossible to capture all the ways that this is happening among us. It really would. But since I know some awesome educators in our church, I thought that we might start by looking there at our local schools. And even in doing that, we're only going to hear from 2 educators in our congregation, and there are quite a few more. I've put together a video to celebrate how the faith that we nurture here can be seen in the everyday work of a teacher and a counselor. I also had a chance to interview a church member who is not an educator, but someone among us who simply cares enough about the welfare of the city where he lives that he serves on the board of a nonprofit that serves schools and students. And sitting down with these 3, I was reminded that what God is looking for in us is faithful partnership in this incredible endeavor to transform the world through the resurrection of Christ.
For as long as I can remember. I honestly have never thought about or considered or even still to this day have any idea what I would do if I wasn't doing this. Mm-hmm. Even when we were little, poor Chris and Patrick had to play school all the time because it's what I've always wanted to do, always seen myself doing. Mm-hmm. Anytime I'm asked this question, I always think of my 4th grade teacher, Miss Dabney. And I've been really lucky because I've been able to keep in contact with her. She's since retired, but again, for me, the thing I just remember the most is I honestly probably couldn't even tell you half the things I learned in 4th grade or the subject matter necessarily, but it was the way that she always stood by her door every morning with a smile and a hug for every single kid that walked in her room. And I thought, you know what? Like, this is a lady that I know cares about me, and I know will continue to care about me. It's not just while I'm in her little classroom. It's you knew that she had a vested interest in the person you were becoming. Kids who are loved at home come to school to learn. Kids who aren't come to school to be loved. And I thought, if that is the way that I can live out my faith by loving some of these kids that don't feel loved at home, then I think for me personally, that's a huge expression of my faith, is to love those that need it. I think I had a little boy last year who we have a lot of transient students, and so he moved in after fall break time, and you could just tell that his family was struggling and things, and just his happiness and energy is what gets me through, especially at this age. They sometimes are so unaware of either how great they have it or how bad they have it. And honestly, I think it's such a blessing because some of these kids, they struggle, but just the joy that they have, and I think the excitement is what I love. And even sometimes I have to remind myself, when you said, I've said the directions 18 times, why are you not doing it? That there's still just that excitement and that love for school usually, and for being with each other, and for wanting to make new friends. And honestly, for me, it's almost the way that they care for one another. Because in first grade, they're pretty blind to differences, which sometimes I kind of laugh when I say, I wish the world could live like my first grade classroom. Sometimes I think if we think of it, and for me, if I think of it in that way, that like, as I look around, who can I target today that just walking in, I can tell they've had a bad morning, or, you know, a rough night, or they're really hungry. How can I change that moment right there?
He said, son, why you gotta sing that tune? Catch a Dylan song.
I think over 25% of our school are students who don't speak English as their first language, and most who still don't speak English in the home when they leave us every day. A large Hispanic population, but we have students from Mongolia and China and Vietnam, and it's a pretty long list. Mexico, Guatemala, I mean, we could just keep going. Honduras, I think. So it's interesting, and it's interesting sometimes to hear their experiences. I have one little girl who didn't speak any English until she got here on the first day of kindergarten.
Wow.
And then there's another little one who's in first grade. She's in her second year of first grade. But when she came on her first day of kindergarten, she had never seen a toilet. And they couldn't figure out why she kept having accidents and why she would cry to go to the restroom. It scared her. She thought she was going to be sucked into the toilet. And so sometimes I think, especially at a place like North Haven, we really have to remember what some of these experiences these kids have lived with, how that translates. And so sometimes you do get frustrated and sit in your chair or, open your book or whatever, but it can just be so drastically different than they've experienced in their life before Jeffersonville.
Well, I originally have a degree in education, English education, and I actually taught English here at Charlestown High School for the first 10 years of my career.
Okay.
And then I went back to school, and I have 2 master's degrees. The first one's just in secondary ed, and then I went back to school and got my second master's degree in actual counseling. I have said this all along, it was God's plan for me to be exactly where I am. So he knew that I needed to be in the classroom, and then he also led me to take that same passion for helping kids to the guidance kind of directive area. So the reasons I became a teacher weren't necessarily that I was passionate about teaching kids grammar and literature, although I do enjoy those things. Strangely enough, really I became a teacher because I wanted to make a difference in kids' lives. So that's really what being a counselor is all about. Well, we actually did a Bible study with Amanda recently that we just talked about the helping nature of being a Christian and how every person deserves compassion and understanding and help, and that Jesus had to teach the disciples that everyone's worthy. And I always had an innate understanding of that, I guess, but I think that was really something instilled in me through my experience as a youngster in church. But I actually start every morning every school in Indiana does the pledge and a moment of silence. And so I actually pray every morning that I will be who God needs me to be today. Part of it, I think, that the calling was somewhat there innately. I was the counselor to my friend group growing up. I was the mom of the group. I was the person who people called when their boyfriend broke up with them, or things weren't going well and they argued with their parents, etc. So I led that life always, and I guess maybe was the wise one who made good decisions and people trusted. So, and I always kind of cherished that trust relationship and was pretty conscientious about being compassionate and a caretaker of people's privacy. So it wasn't really until I was in the classroom and I felt myself being a good influence. I was coaching and the kids would turn to me, and it's not uncommon for me to sit and pray with someone. I ask permission to pray. So I guess I was in the profession when I finally realized that this is where God wanted me to be. Well, what I do is never the same from day to day. I really, honestly, a lot of what I do is administrative. And so I might go a day where I see 25 kids in a day, but that is unusual. Typically, probably 5 or less a day is really more the norm for me, who actually come in and sit and talk. The person who was just in is not doing well in calculus and needed help dealing with that. The person before him was referred because he's not doing well in math, but as he came in, I knew that I'd talked to his brother earlier this week and he didn't have a place to stay, so that conversation went from why the homework isn't getting turned in to what can we do knowing that you don't really have a consistent place to stay every day. So that was a much longer conversation. The stories that we learn and the things we learn, my conversations with the teachers that had referred the little guy I was talking about, then they changed tone. The whole concept of how you talk to the people in the building, I guess part of our job is to help them see the pieces that are missing. The teacher has an instinct to know something isn't right. Why is this happening this way? And often we're the ones who get to the root of, as a counselor, what's going on behind the scenes and those sorts of issues. So I laugh every day, both with the kids and with my colleagues. So that is definitely a piece of what makes me like my job, but what makes me feel like I make a difference. Obviously, it's when the kids come back and tell you. One most recent moment is at Honors Day. This can make me cry probably. At Honors Day, I have a student who has just had, last year, a senior. I'd worked with his sister before him, had a very difficult life. Dad died of cancer, mom's a drug addict, but he won a scholarship, and the woman who was awarding the scholarship asked him to read the essay he wrote. And I had no idea, but he wrote about an educator who had made the most difference in his life and who had believed in him. And that is the most recent example of making a difference. And you never know. His choices weren't always great either. And sometimes I felt like I cared more than he did. But for them to, moments like that definitely remind us that, things we may have said or done that were in the moment definitely impacted someone. So that's another reason you want to be grounded in God, because you never know.
My grades were bad. I would get D's and C's.
It got worse and worse and worse throughout the years. I mean, it was just rough focusing on school when your mother, who acts like a child, is somebody you have to take care of.
I appeared to be doing good at my school life, but if you would see me at home, it would have been a completely different story.
There are students who need somebody.
You don't have to have the answer, they just want you to listen to them. So once you figure that out, it's good.
If something was going on at home, we would go just stop by Miss Liberty's office and talk to her.
They can trust someone, and it could be the first person they've ever trusted in their life.
I feel very empowered to make positive choices for my students.
If you looked at my transcript, you can see a huge difference.
Help us change the picture of education for more than 1.3 million kids every year. Visit communitiesandschools.org.
I hear people say we can't save every kid, but I think that we can.
Well, I was asked to join the board from day one. We first met in October of 2001. It was part of IUS, and they met at the mayor's office, and we went through all their letters and trying to get an organization. This is a national organization. They were trying to get involved into Indiana, And it's an organization that gets into the schools, has counselors, therapists into the schools. So we have coordinators into the schools that help with whatever the teachers, whatever the principal administration needs. A lot of times they help the kids that are high risk to make sure that they stay in school and that they succeed in life. And that may include helping them with homework, may include helping them getting things. When I say getting things, getting them schoolwork, getting them food, getting them after school, different areas that might, and that's happened. There's been circumstances that we've gone out of the way to make sure somebody has a home. I'm trying to think how the organization really is, but a guy started it thinking, okay, we just need to get into the schools. We need to make sure kids stay into school and succeed.
Right.
And this is one way of keeping kids in school. And you think if you keep them at a grade school level, get to them early, they stay in. Because once they get behind second, third, fourth grade, they never catch up. You got to make a community better to live in. You got to give back and try to make the community better as a whole. And this is one way of doing it. I mean, make sure that education it works both ways. I mean, you think you're doing well for people, but yet doing well for people is part of the faith. So it goes back and forth. It's connected. I mean, it's not like you can do one or the other. It works for both. I mean, I enjoy doing it. I wouldn't do it if it wasn't for giving back to the community, giving back to an organization, and making the society better, making a better community. And that's part of faith also. I mean, that's part of giving back. And that's why I said they're intertwined.
Yeah.
It's not, I wouldn't do it one or the other. You sort of do it for both. That's just the way you do it. This person, or a mother writes in, a father writes in, a parent writes in, here's what happened. I'm just grateful this happened and this they've got help to keep my kids in school and to keep my kids fed. And there's just things like that have happened, and it makes you feel like you're doing something right.
Yeah.
And when you hear the administration real happy about it too. I've run into different teachers, and I don't think they knew I was on the board. I just sort of suggest, how about the communities in school? Is that worthwhile, or is it not? Oh yeah, it's great they do this. Like, that's all I need to hear. So that's good. When you get reassurance that way, when somebody tells you, and when you hear the administrators and you talk to some of them, talk about how good of a program it is and how it really helps to support the teachers and the whole school, and to keep kids in there and try to help keep kids in there. Because it's a separate, they go around and it's a separate situation where they talk to the kids and like, this is, we don't have to do this, but we're doing this to try to make sure you stay in school. We also do eye tests, free screening for eyes once a year for first graders, make sure that they can see, and if need to be, put them in the right path to get glasses. Right. So that just things, just to do the background to help out to succeed. I give the staff a lot of credit. If we didn't have good staff, it wouldn't work. But they're passionate about it, and they like it. We got a strong board, a lot of members. Walt Coppinger's part of the board too. And whenever there's a meeting, the people are there, and it's a strong board, and it's a fun board. It's good, nice to see doing something for the community.